You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as the drummer for the multi-platinum and two-time Grammy-nominated band Papa Roach. He played drums on the band's first 5 albums, including the 4.5 million selling monster major label debut album, Infest. That album had 4 global smash hits, including Last Resort, Broken Home, Between Angels and Insects, and Dead Self. So welcome to the podcast, Dave Buckner. Dave, how are you? And can you believe that it's already been over 20 years since the release of Infest? Can you believe that?
Yes, I can. But first, let me just say, Joel, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really grateful to be here. It's just a great opportunity to just, kind of show up and just shoot the breeze and it's cool, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, man, I when it comes to I can't believe, it's been 22 years now, since we released the major label debut, and I really don't know what to say. I kind of do this little math experiment with my family. So I'm like, when I was a kid around 12, 13 years old and discovering music, in earnest for the first time, I was listening to stuff. So this is like about 88, 89, right? The 80s. And I was listening to music that was from mid 60s all the way through like mid 70s. I was discovering artists like Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, right? And so that was like 20 years back from my point of reference as a kid. And now I look and I'm like, okay, my first album that I made is now older than my, these classic albums that I was listening to as a kid. So it's almost like my youngest son, my son Bon is 13 years old. So it's right about the same time frame, you know what I mean? It's weird, man. It feels weird. I don't know, like, do we call it classic rock now, or I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. You know what I mean? It's just pretty wild.
Yeah. Now when I'm driving and the music that I grew up listening to at 16, 17, 18 is on the classic rock stations, I heard Finger 11 recently on classic rock, Papa Roach. You're like, oh man, like we're getting old if that's classic rock. Cause for me, classic rock is like Led Zeppelin, Tom Petty, Black Sabbath, all that stuff. But right. It's an honor to be included in that group, right? If you're still getting radio play. So
absolutely. And I mean, just the simple fact that, that album has stood the test of time, you know what I mean? It's still listenable and popular today. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, Last Resort is just one of those songs that, I always make the analogy, Aerosmith has like Dream On. It's like not their only hit, but it was like their first hit. It's it's the song that everyone kind of knows them for. And I'm like, Last Resort's kind of like our Dream On, you know what I mean? And it'll always be that, and it's, I mean, that song gets spun at EDM festivals. Like I think Steve Aoki dropped it in his set, and if I'm not mistaken, I think there's that DJ Marshmello. I think, dude, there's so many DJs that like drop it in their set. And, like the crazy thing is, like as soon as it comes on, like no matter what room you're in, no matter what country you're in, whether it's a club or a stadium or whatever, like if that song gets dropped, like everyone knows the words. You know what I mean? It's just like this ubiquitous, like, it's like a phenomenon or something. I don't know, dude. I can't explain it, but it's something special, and I'm really grateful for that,
When I ask bands that are celebrating the 20, 25, 30-year anniversary of their breakthrough albums, Uh, Most of them say it feels like yesterday, but it also feels like a lifetime ago. Like it feels like both of them because you remember writing and recording the album. You remember what it's like when the album comes out and blows up and radio play and music videos and awards and all that stuff. But also there's the lifetime of like personal growth and having kids and you're in a way different place now than you were then. Does that feel accurate? It does feel like recent, but also feels like a lifetime ago.
Absolutely, that's entirely accurate. I mean, I can remember where I was, where we were during the recording process of that record, everything leading up to that. You know what I mean? Like going from an independent band to getting signed to a major label, and then writing that song and that album, going in the studio to record it. You know what I mean? Um, and then after the album drops, everything kind of became a blur. You know what I mean? So there's bits and pieces that I can pick out, and I kind of can put the story together in my mind, but it all happened so fast and so quick, and my life changed. The year 2000, my life changed entirely.
It's all a hot mess after that.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And then and like you're saying, like now, I'm a dad. I have my son and my stepson, and my priorities have shifted. You know what I mean? And it's a different, different life. Almost seems like it's a lifetime ago, but I still remember it like it had just happened.
So a few months ago, I had our mutual friend Rich Bedeau as a guest on the podcast. So for our listeners, he was the drummer for Finger 11 and Saint Sonia. And when I'm done interviews, I always ask my guests, "Hey man, can you think of anyone that would make for an amazing interview in the future?" And he had just two people in mind. He had Sekou Lumumba, the drummer for Big Wreck, who I had as a guest a few months ago. And he said Dave Buckner. And that's how we ended up here today. So that's our connection. And I wanted to kick off this episode powerfully. So I reached out to Rich, and Rich sent in some kind words to help me out here. So he must really love you because he wrote a novel. So hang tight. And this is from Rich Bedeau. So here we go. He says, "Man, oh man, I don't even know where to begin when it comes to my friend Dave. Bucky Suds." That's the nickname there? Bucky Suds Buckner?
That's his nickname for me. Yep.
There
In
you
certain
go.
circles, that's the nickname I go by. Yep.
There you go. So he says, "I don't know where to start, but I'll start here. When I and millions of other fans around the world first heard 'Cut my life into pieces, this is my last resort,' we were hooked. Those words were powerful indeed. But it was when the drums kicked in that monstrous anthemic groove that the world began to move. They began to dance, mosh, jump, and scream. That was the moment we heard and felt the power that was Papa Roach, and the world hasn't been the same since. Dave Buckner is a ferocious drummer with a style all of his own. Millions of kids and adults around the world air drum to his drumming every day and learn how to play his parts on the drum set. He's an icon and so very respected among his peers. I've had the pleasure of playing the festival circuit with his band over the years, and I can never keep my eyes off of him. He makes it look easy, and it ain't, trust me. Even just a couple of years ago, me and Dave had a big jam night in Hollywood with a bunch of friends, and I was once again stunned at his power. There would be no Papa Roach without Dave, partly because he had a part in naming the band. He was the sound of those first few iconic records. It's kind of funny that both me and Dave don't really have a clear memory of actually hanging out with each other back then, though. We both know we did, but it's all just a foggy blur now, which leads me to the next part of this. In recent years, me and Dave have become very close. We share in something that is very important to both of us, something that nearly killed both of us, something that only a few people can understand, that we only trust in certain people to talk about. We share our victories, our failures, our fears, and our rock bottoms. Between the two of us, we try to help others do the same. With friends like Dave, I can proudly say I'm an addict in recovery. Dave has helped me and many others to become sober and to thrive in their lives. I know I can call him anytime, day or night, and he would be there for me. I feel really lucky to have him in my life. Dave is also an amazing father and husband. He is a guide for me on how to raise my family. I friggin' love you, Dave. That sounds like Rich. And I'm so blessed to have a guy like you in my life. So that's Rich Bedeau. former drummer, Finger 11, and Saint Asonia. How's that for
Oh
a
man, that
quote?
was amazing and beautiful, man. Rich, I love that dude to pieces, man. He's one of those guys that yeah, like he said in his novel, right? We ran into each other, our paths crossed many times along the way, in our old lives. And but I know him in a completely different way, and I feel much closer to him today than I ever did when we were running amok, out in the world. And he's a lifer. He's a lifer, man. That's my boy till death. You know what I mean? So, dude, thank you so much, Beto. Team Beto. That was awesome, man. That was great.
Team Beto. So our listeners, they're seeing you now, and they see this awesome room with all these multi-platinum plaques behind you and awards and all that stuff. They see this rock star. They're seeing kind of the end result of a lifetime of work and dedication and practice and vision and goal setting and all that stuff. So I like to take it back to the beginning and go through a journey to take everyone from the beginning to where you are today. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where did this love of music come from? And is there maybe an earliest musical memory that jumps out at you as being meaningful?
Yes, absolutely. My earliest musical memory is riding around in the back seat of my mom's 1960, I think it was like a 66 Ford Falcon. And I think I must have been around 4 years old. And she had two 8 tracks that I remember. And one of them was Pink Floyd The Wall. And the other was like B-52s. I forget which album, but it had the song Rock Lobster on it. And so my earliest musical memory, like when I first, kind of tuned in to like, what is this happening, was riding in the backseat of my mom's car, and the song in particular was In the Flesh, like the first song on the Pink Floyd The Wall album. Like just the pure like bombast, of that song. Like it just and she listened to it so much, and I just like I internalized that album so much that it's become part of my musical DNA. But that's literally like the first album that I can remember listening to as a kid. Pink
I,
Floyd
th-
The Wall.
I think we have to give your mom props because there's no better start to a life in music, a musical career, than getting Pink Floyd The Wall. Soaking that in through osmosis from your mom playing it and getting comfortably numb and Another Brick in the Wall and all the great songs off that album. So can we give a powerful shout out to your mom for that one? That's pretty amazing. And
Yes, thank you so much, Mom. Thank you for
there
that.
you go. And how did you gravitate towards the drums in the beginning? So it's one thing hearing that music at 4 years old and becoming a fan of listening to music, but it's something else to actually start playing by picking up an instrument.
Yeah, my my love for drums came. I can still remember the moment. I was over at my aunt's house. So music has been in and around my family, over the generations. Like my grandmother's father was a trumpet player in a big band in Los Angeles. That's where our family's from. And I forget what it was called, but his name was Prisco Castro, and he played the trumpet in a big band, and they had like they got to play on the radio and stuff. Like this is like in the 40s, right? So that was like my first, when I was talking to my family about it, that's like kind of just like they were sharing with me like the lineage of like, yeah, music's, and my family's great lovers of music. And my aunt Allie, she had an amazing vinyl and CD collection. And one day I was over at her house and I was listening. So I discovered like the Doors, Metallica, um, Suicidal Tendencies through my Aunt Allie. She actually used to take me to, because Suicidal Tendencies is local from the area of Los Angeles I'm from. And I actually got to go. It's funny is I don't actually remember this, but I'm going to share it as if I do. But according to my aunt, she said that she took me to go see Suicidal Tendencies at the Culver City Vets Hall, back like I think even before their first record deal. Like they were playing at basically the community center in Culver City. and she had taken me. I think I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and got to see Suicidal. And so so my aunt has been a great inspiration, as far as my passion and love for music. But I was over at her house one day, and I was listening to Beatles' Sergeant Pepper's, and particularly the song "A Day in the Life." And I don't know what it was about that song or that moment or whatever, but something inside me just clicked, and I just heard, like, I heard it. I heard the drums for the first time. I can actually like differentiate what the drums were doing apart from what the rest of the music was doing, right? That spoke to me. And so that's when I decided, like, I wanted to be a drummer. That was it. And the rest is history.
So would you consider Ringo as one of your early drum influences then?
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, dude, Ringo. He's one of the masters, dude. He is the legend. He's the legendary drummer in rock and roll, right? Him,
And
for me, like him and Bonzo, like John Bonham. Bonham's he's such a drum idol to me that I named my son after him. Yeah.
there's,
So
I mean, there's no bigger honor that you can bestow than naming your child after someone, right? So
yeah, for
that's
sure.
that's amazing. And as a kid, was there anything you wanted to be growing up before you really got into music seriously and decided that you want to do that for a living? Anything else that you wanted to be as a kid?
Oh, as a kid, like, when I was just dreaming of what I would be when I grew up,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to be a fighter pilot. Well, actually, what I really wanted to do for a living was to pilot those giant mech robots from the cartoon Robotech. Like, I in my imagination, those things were real, or they would be. They would come into existence by the time I was an adult, and then I could pilot one. And then, I kind of realized, well, if that doesn't happen, I'll settle for flying fighter jets. That'd be awesome. You know what I
It's
mean? So
it's
that
good.
was,
It's good to have a dream and it's good to have a backup plan, I suppose.
yeah, for sure.
And if I met you at 12 years old, who would I be meeting?
Dude, me, 12.
No
You
beard yet.
know, no beard, no beard. Um, kid, local, city kid from LA, West Side kid, beach, running to the beach, running around town, with his aunt, taking the Santa Monica Big Blue bus everywhere. You know what I mean? Kind of fiercely independent. Um, Pretty good in school, never really got in trouble. Chubby kid, I was always a overweight kid my entire life until just about 11 years ago. Um, so maybe a little bit, insecure, wanted the other kids to like him, always wanted to be one of the cool kids, but never felt like one. You know what I mean? Um, Great love. I love to skateboard. I had my dogtown skateboard that I would, trek around city in, and or what else? Yeah, man, that's kind of me, dude. Loved to draw. I was always like doodling, or making creations, drawing logos and cars. I really like to draw cars. Um, that's me, man. Music, art, skating, the beach, LA lifestyle as a kid, as much as a kid can take in, you know what I mean? Independent, and yeah.
And what happened 11 years ago that allowed you to get in shape for the first time in your life?
I made a decision that, well, what happened was, my son was born in 2009, and at that point in my life, I had gotten to a weight that I was the heaviest I'd ever been in my life. I was over 400 pounds. And after a couple years of, trying to chase after him and realizing it wasn't working, I finally made a decision and took on the commitment that, like, hey, if I want to stick around, like, because on top of just not being able to keep up with the kid, I mean, like, you know, if you're carrying around an unhealthy amount of extra weight, there's so many different comorbidities, they call them, you know, right, that can interfere with your health and basically affect your lifespan. And so I was like, if I really am going to be serious about being a dad, I need to be serious about my health. And um, that was one of the decisions I made, was to, you know, shit or get off the pot, so to speak, you know what I mean? And take it seriously and just drop the weight. So,
Wow. Well, looking at you now, I can't imagine you at 400 pounds, man. You look great, man. That's awesome. And
oh, thank
even
you.
even today, that's a big priority where you watch what you eat and there's exercise and all that.
Well, nowadays, I mean, there was a time about 5 or 6 years ago when I had gotten so far into like the fitness thing. I was like doing the insanity workout, eating completely clean, like protein shakes, kale, and like grilled chicken, like was all I ate, right? And tons of water. And like I was doing the insanity workout, and my fat level was down to like I think 13%, which is like almost like professional athlete level of fitness. I was in the best shape of my life. Um, but I would wake up sore every day, and it was like, oh man, is this supposed to be like this? So eventually I kind of relaxed. I was like, you know, I'm going to take it a little bit easier. Plus, you know, like it's hard to maintain when you're at that level of fitness. It's hard to maintain that. Like you have to really get after it. You know what I mean? It takes like 80%. It takes about 20% of the effort to get 80% of the result, and then it takes 80% of the effort to get that last 20% of results. If you feel what I'm saying, and to maintain that, I mean, like I would have to be working out like a savage. So anyway, so today, like I'm rocking the dad bod. You know what I mean? Like it's all good. It's all good. You know, like but I still take what I eat very seriously. You know, like try and eat the best I can. You know, I really make my nutrition a priority. You know what I mean, and my macros, and make sure I'm getting the right amount of protein and green veg, and that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, that's my life today.
Yeah, if you have kale in your diet, you're pretty serious about your health. So if we go back to when you were 16, if you and I were friends at 16, you invited me over to listen to some music, what albums would you be spinning for me at 16?
Bro, okay. Let me make sure I got the time right on this, and I think I do. But definitely Jane's Addiction, right? Beastie
So
Boys, Check Your Head.
is this early 90s then,
This would
or
be this would be 92, I
okay.
think,
Yeah.
right? So Jane's Addiction, Nine Inch Nails, anything from Seattle, like all of it. I loved all of it, all that whole movement. Like when a record came out, I was on top of it. You know what I mean? Who else was listening to it at 16? I basically like I became a sponge for music. So it wasn't just rock too. It was like a lot of alternative, some metal, lots of hip hop. So like Beastie, Cypress Hill, like Tribe Called Quest. Uh, Trying to think if Wu-Tang came out. I think they came out like maybe when I was 17, but yeah, right around that same age. So like tons of like Wu-Tang and Funk Dubious and uh a lot of those 90s hip hop records that came out that were like they sounded like just really grungy and dirty and kind of lo-fi. And a lot of the rock music was sounding lo-fi. And then because of the like Kurt Cobain and his like he was kind of the poster child for this ethos that like, you know, you don't need to sell out to corporate record labels. You can make your own music and do it all yourself. Everything was DIY at that time. And so it was about making zines and making your own music, making your own records and merch and t-shirts and doing everything yourself. And that was right at the time we started the band, was 90, 92, 93. Um, but yeah, that was my musical diet. Who else was I listening to? So all the on top of all those bands, um, White Zombie, um, Anyway, we'll just leave it there. I think that's a pretty expansive list for you.
Man, what a good time for
Ooh,
music.
Fugazi. I forgot Fugazi.
Fugazi. There you go.
Don't forget
So
Fugazi for sure.
1991, 1992 is widely considered the greatest period, modern period for rock music. So 91, 92, you have the debut from Rage Against the Machine, the self-titled album. You have Metallica, the
Dude,
Black
yeah.
Album. You have Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic. You have Stone Temple
Yes.
Pilots. Is it Core? I think around then you have a
Yeah,
Nine
their
Inch
first
Nails
song.
album in there. You have Guns and Roses. I think Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 is around then. 91 is like as good as it gets, man. I think there's a Soundgarden album in there. You got Pearl Jam 10, I think might be 91. Nirvana Nevermind. Like it's literally the greatest year ever for rock music. And it was when you turned 16, like the year where you really absorb music and kind of shape who you are as a musician. So I think that's pretty amazing.
Yes, every single one of those albums that you listed, I was listening to at the time. And dude, even like Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, which I think came out in '89, but to me, to this day, is still my favorite album from Crue. You know what I mean? I think with that album, they had just taken it to a different level, and it was like the coolest album I'd ever heard from them. But so also in '92, if you remember the Lollapalooza when it used to be a tour, right? So I got to go to Lollapalooza at Shoreline Amphitheater '92. I was 16, and the lineup was Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Ministry, Cypress Hill, um, Jesus and Mary Chain. Who else? There's a few more. There's a few more on that list. But I mean, dude, Ministry, Psalm 69. What a fucking album that was. Just amazing. I mean, like, dude, you know what I mean? Just the whole industrial. There's so many different movements and music going on at that time too. Whether it was like the retro '70s, like I always thought like Soundgarden was like the reincarnation of Black Sabbath. It was like Black Sabbath for my generation. You know what I mean? Um, and then like the punk rock from Seattle, like Nirvana, it was like very retro. But then like you had like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry, and there's a few other industrial bands at that time too. I think Cam FDM, you know, if you remember them. Um, Dude, yeah, it was a great time for music, and I was soaking it all in. I was just a sponge taking it all in.
And how early on did you know that you had something to offer as a drummer, that you actually had skill there, and that this could be something you do for a living as a career?
You know, that's a great question because I think even to this day, I still question like what it is that I bring to the table, right? So I'm like, I know I can play, but what is it that makes me more special or has given me this opportunity to make a career out of it? And I think for me, you know, the answer wasn't so much it wasn't my talent or my technical ability, but it was my drive and vision. I think that carried. So like it was, I had an intense need, like burning in my heart, like to express myself, and I wanted as many people as could be to hear what I had to say. And my voice was the drums, and my voice was, you know, starting this band and building this brand. I mean, now you could look back in the day, it didn't feel like it, but I'm like, dude, we built, you know, I helped build a brand and a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. You know what I mean? Like we're a rock and roll startup, you know, we started in the garage. And so that, I think for me, that's what it was. It wasn't like, oh man, I'm like the best drummer around. You know what I mean? It was more like, hey, like I'm really passionate about sharing my soul through this musical voice, and I'm really passionate about music itself because music is one of the greatest tools of communication we have as a species, right? Like it's the thing that, like, you know, you can have your favorite movies and like, yeah, that's cool, like it's a great movie and like that was a great, but when you hear one of your favorite songs, or like only music, to me in my experience, when I hear certain songs, my mind, my memory goes right back to like a certain time period. It's like a soundtrack to my life. You know what I mean? And as far as to me, music is the most powerful communicator of emotion. You know what I mean? And it could transport me, to basically different points along my journey of life. And it's the only thing I found that can do that. You know what I mean? Like I could see a place and remember things, but when I hear a song, I'm there.
They did a whole movie on that. So there's a movie on the power of music when it comes to dementia and memories and all that stuff. And for people that are basically can't function anymore because of Alzheimer's or dementia, suddenly they make a mixtape of their favorite music when they were younger, and they liven right up, they come back and they're there and they're talking about that time, and it's weird. People come back to life. And what it is with dementia, it's like you lose the memories, but when you have music attached to a memory, it stores it somewhere else that doesn't get wiped out by dementia and Alzheimer's. So music can trigger deeper memories, and that's why they suddenly, they haven't been mobile in years, and they get up and they dance. They remember the dance that they were doing at the time. They start talk, like you take the headphones off and they're still back, and they're like, oh, I used to whatever and do this, and they haven't spoken in 6 months. It's crazy. So just to add to you talking about, you've never seen anything but music have that kind of power on people and memories and emotions. So to tie in with that, yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like that's amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
So
Thank you, Joel, for that.
I'll
I'm gonna have to
I'll,
look into that.
I'll send you that link. Yeah,
Send me a link, please. Yeah,
the
awesome.
the movie's free on YouTube, so I'll get that to you. Memory movie. Just got to make a note. So if I'm following the timeline correctly, so you were 16 around 1991, which means that you were only about 18 at the time where Papa Roach starts forming. Did you play in any other bands growing up, or you were so young when Papa Roach started that's basically the only band that you were in?
Yeah, so 16, and I turned 16 in 1992. We started Papa Roach in 1993, early like February of 1993. Actually, I think we had been talking about it before, like over that winter or something like that. Cody and I had met at school on the football field. We were both playing football, and during practice, like when we weren't busy doing drills or whatever you do at football practice, like we would just chop it up and talk about music and stuff. What was the question again? I started jogging that memory.
If you had played in any other bands before
Papa other Roach. Bands. Yeah, I had in junior high, I had a band called, I don't even know if we had a name. But I remember there was a rival band at school. I went to Lincoln Middle School in Santa Monica, and me and my friends had a band. Actually, the guitar player from my junior high band now plays in a band called The Voids with Julian Casablancas. This guy Amir Yagmai.
That's the Strokes, Julian.
Julian from the Strokes has a side band called The Void, and the guitar player from my junior high band, this guy Amir, plays guitar for that band. And I think that's a cool story. I like to share stuff like that when I remember it. But I had a couple bands before Roach in high school. Like when my family moved to Vacaville in 91, was my first year living there, going to school. And I had I was in a punk band, like a very Dead Milkmen inspired punk band called Chernobyl Kids.
Good name.
Right? Did you hear that? Did that come through, that ding?
I didn't hear anything.
Okay, I just heard it in my computer. So at least if it's not, hopefully it's not coming through Zoom. So Chernobyl Kid, and then I was in a like a new wave type, a new wave band, like this band that I think we were very derivative of. I want to say like maybe Depeche Mode and Ned's Atomic Dust Band. Anyway, that band was called Nude, N-U-N-D, Nude. And then my third band in Vacaville in high school was actually, our first name was the Groove Merchant. The Groove Merchants.
These are all good names. I'm impressed.
Right?
These are good names.
And but the Groove Merchants, which had me, Jacoby, Ben Luther on trombone, and Will James on bass. And we shortly after naming ourselves the Groove Merchants, we changed the name to Papa Roach, and that was the first iteration of Papa Roach. Was me, Cobe, Ben Luther on trombone, Will James on bass.
Okay. And so you knew Jacoby from football. He knew you were a drummer. You knew he was a singer. And by talking about music, you guys decided at some point we should jam and maybe we could do a project together, be a band.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly how it happened. And I mean, really, that's really, the story is just as simple as that, really. We were just both passionate about music. And actually, Jacoby was meant to be, him and I, when we first decided to jam together, he had started playing bass. He was playing bass, and he had bought like this cheap beginner's bass from the pawn shop. And he was going to bring it over and jam. He may have come over once or twice to my garage and jammed. And shortly after, like, we started that, his bass was stolen out of the back of his truck. And he's like, dude, like, our dreams are dashed, dude. Like, we can't jam. I don't have a bass anymore. I'm like, I don't know, just sing. It's free. You don't have to buy a new bass. Just be the singer. And he's like, that's a great idea. And then we got a hold of this kid, Will, who was a recent transplant, who also moved from Southern California. He moved from Norco, California to Vacaville. And he had a little reputation around school as being a really rad bass player. And he was really awesome bass player. And then, yeah, we just reformed the band with Jacoby as the singer.
That's a little bit of history there. We have our first fan question sent in. So this is from Amanda Luciano. She says, I have always wanted to know where they got their name from. So there was Papa something else before Papa Roach, right? And there was a name change. Can you share a little bit? Wasn't there Papa Gato or something, or is this false information?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you, Luciano, for your question. It's a great question. And yeah, we had like I said, the original name of the band was the Groove Merchants, but we decided we had a bunch of names written down, like, on a sheet of notebook paper, in different columns, like, good contenders, and then, like, maybes, and then, like, throwaways, like, like, if we can't think of anything else, we'll just, name whatever. And one of the contenders I came to the table with was Papa Gato, which means Papa Cat, Daddy Cat. And it was the name of this Latin jazz album I was listening to at the time. There's a conga player named Poncho Sanchez who put out records, and I was listening to his record Papa Gato, and I'm like, I just threw it on the list, and Kobe's like, that's a great idea. Like, I really like that. And he's like, but what if we call it Papa Roach? He's like, because my stepdad's dad, so my step grandfather is Bill Roach, right? Like, and everyone calls him Papa Roach. So what if we call the band Papa Roach? And I was like, that's a great idea. But your stepdad, the family, they spell their last name Roatch with a T. I'm like, what if we took out the T, and then we can make it, about bugs and, other Roach, other, associated topics that you might think of when you hear the word Roach. You know what I mean?
It's, man, the Groove Merchants is a great name, but
pretty good.
But with you guys being heavier, if you were maybe in a different style, the Groove, the Groove Merchants would be the right name. But I think as you guys maybe got heavier, the name change is probably good. I mean, things have worked out well with the name Papa Roach. So I'm just impressed with the Groove Merchants. I mean, that's a great name.
I think we got that. I think we lifted that from, I think it's like a Beastie Boys lyric. Yeah. I think there's a rap, Ad Rock is saying, he's like, yada, 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 because I'm the Groove Merchant. And we're like, ooh, that's good. Write that one down. But yeah. I would say everything have worked out nicely with the name we chose.
Yeah, things turned out just fine. So you guys formed the band in high school. You get the name changed to Papa Roach. Lore has it that you entered a talent show And you guys didn't actually win the talent show. And my question is, do you think the winners of that talent show also went on to sell, 6, 7, 8 million albums? Do you think they had the same success as you guys who didn't win?
Oh man, I can't remember who won the talent show. And you know what? I don't remember it as being a competition. I think it was just like a showcase of talent. I don't think there was like an actual winner declared, but if there was, I don't think there was any losers that day. I'll just say that. Maybe if there was a winner and we weren't it, whoever did win that, I mean, that was, I'm sure, one of the bright shining moments in their life, and they could hang that on their, and they can always brag that they won the talent show over Papa Roach. Like, dude, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's a cool claim to fame right there. So
It's documented. It's documented that they are better and or more popular than Papa Roach. I mean, it's right
yes,
there. Yeah.
for February of 1993 at Vacaville High School, yes, that is entirely true.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
have some kind words sent in here from Sonny Mayo, who member of Snot, Seven Dust, Amen, and is with Rock for Recovery now. So this is from Sonny. Sonny says, Snot opened for Papa Roach, Incubus, and Salmon at a youth center in Vacaville. I'm saying that right? Vacaville? Is that
Vacaville,
right?
correct.
In Vacaville, California in 1995. I had just moved from VA to join Snot a few months earlier, and my head was spinning at how powerful the scene was at that time. Our paths only crossed a few times over the subsequent years, but it was all love every time we connected. I was aware that Dave struggled with substances just as I did in the tumultuous world of band life in the music business. I'm beyond grateful that we hit a sufficient bottom and have rebuilt our lives with joy and purpose. Love you, Dave. That's from Sonny Mayo, Snot Seven Dust.
Oh man, Sonny, that's my boy, dude. I love Sonny. Sonny, I mean, like, dude, I don't know if the listeners out there can kind of put together. There's an underlying current, a theme going on here. If you've been listening carefully, but yes, Sonny and Rich are very good friends of mine, and I love them to death. And yeah, once again, both of them lifers for sure. But
So
yeah, dude, we played with Snot. We had a chance for to headline over Snot at our local community center in Vacaville in the mid late 90s.
So as we move forward through the timeline with Papa Roach through the discography, we've made it up to 1997, and this is the release of the independent album, Old Friends from Young Years. When you think back to that debut album, what thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you? I mean, that kicked off this lifelong journey with Papa Roach. What comes back to you now when you think of that independent album?
Well, actually, what's coming back to me right now is, can we just circle back to Snot real quick and talk about how fucking dope Snot was? Like, I don't know if you remember the first time you ever heard Snot, but oh my God, dude. Dude, the band, I mean, it was Sonny and Lynn and Toomer and John, right? And the drummer, Shannon Larkin. Like, amazing band, dude. Like, every time we got to, like, we opened for them quite a few times, just around, and then, like I said, one time we had a chance for them to open for us. But I remember I would just sit. I remember we played one of the shows. I remember in particular was this small little pub in Chico, California, and there was no backstage, so everyone was just out on the floor. I think the drums were set up in the front of the pub, like next to like a big like bay window. And that's where the drums were. And I just remember sitting on the floor next to Shannon and just watching him just get after it. Like, dude, it's such an that whole band was amazing. Actually, no, I got it wrong. You know who the drummer for Snot was? Jamie. What am I thinking? It was Jamie. But he reminded me of Shannon. He reminded me, like, the way he played reminded me of Shannon Larkin. And with Shannon is amazing drummer. Don't get it twisted. Like, my mind's a little, now that I'm a little bit more got a little bit more life under my belt, the memories kind of get squirrely. But dude, Jamie, oh my God, dude. Amazing. Anyway, so Snot was great. But anyway, I digress. Sorry about that.
So
I
for
just had
for
to
our
rip on
listeners,
stuff.
so for our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with the band Snot, if they were going to listen to just one Snot album, which one do you recommend for them to start
The
with?
the first one, the first Get Some. Yeah, or at least that's the first album that I knew that they put out. And they might, I don't know if they had indie releases before then, but yeah, Get Some. It's the album with Lynn's dog on the cover, and he's got like a tennis ball on his nose, and the logo is written on the tennis ball. Awesome, amazing band.
Perfect. And your album in '97, what comes to mind with that debut album? And who were the Papa Roach's biggest influences at the time of writing and recording that album? Because that's a heavy album, and it might even be Papa Roach's heaviest album. I just gave it a spin the other day. So
Uh, so we're talking about Old Friends from Young Years, right? The
yeah,
indie record.
the
That
indie
was
record.
our first attempt at making a full length album, and we recorded it at Tobin's dad's studio in Pittsburgh, California. He had a garage studio that he had he had a tracking room, vocal booth, all the mics, ADAT machines, some bells and whistles and toys, to get it on, get everything on tape. We recorded it to digital audio, and it was just, I think we spent, we scrounged and saved and pitched in, and we were able to put together, I think it cost us $600 to record that record, just for the recording, and then like printing and design. Of course, like the album cover, I designed the album cover and did all the CD layout and everything like that. And then we had it printed through. There's a company called Disc Makers out there. I think they're still around, but that's how we produced and distributed the record, was through Disc Makers, and I did all the artwork and stuff like that. But dude, at that time, and I think you might, I mean, as far as just like pure, I remember like the recordings. I mean, that was before, we were just so raw then, right? So raw, and we wanted to be experimental and dissonant and heavy. And then, but there was like this kind of like this current of like expressing like emotional, I think even like the whole like discussing like mental health and stuff like that, it's kind of, starts to creep its way in on that record. It was kind of, like if you think about a lot of Papa Roach music, I mean, it's a lot about, confronting your demons, overcoming, and then, persevering through the other side, and that, I think that's been consistent throughout the career, but with me and then after me, if you listen to the lyrical content and stuff like that. But at that time, yeah, we just wanted to be heavy, and we were so young and raw, and it was a great time to be that, because music was that at that time. There's so many, like I said, independent, and like it was cool to sound lo-fi. It was cool to sound like you didn't have a big budget studio. You know what I mean? Like that was what was cool, and then for us, like, and then if you listen to that record, my Pink Floyd The Wall story, kind of makes that record makes more sense, because there's a lot of like little there's little not, I wouldn't say skits, but little like vignettes of sound and things like that kind of like bleed from one song to another. And that I brought that in because of Pink Floyd The Wall. Like, how do I wallify this album? How do I make an album that takes you on a journey? And were we talking about influences too?
Yeah, because that's the recording is very raw.
Yeah, for sure.
The album is very heavy. I mean, I'd say it's one of Papa Roach's heaviest albums. You can hear that it's Papa Roach with the signature, singing, screaming, rapping, all of that's there, all the elements of Papa Roach. I'm curious what the biggest influences were for all the members of the band together as a whole, because you might have brought in, Pink Floyd influence and the grunge influence, maybe the other members something else. So I'd say as a whole, which bands do you think influenced that recording specifically the most?
Dude, I'll say Faith No More for sure. Mr. Bungle, which is another Mike Patton band, right? Um, Beastie Boys, Rage, obviously. Uh, like Cypress Hill, right? The Pixies, if that makes any sense, but it does. Like one of the songs is actually the name of the song is like something we heard on a Pixies record where it's like Black Francis was like screaming like I said you fucking die, and like we're like we wrote a song like and named it that, like it's so but like just the kind of like melodic, you know what I mean, like there's definitely like Pixies influence, if that it sounds so weird to say it, but it's true. And um there was a local band at that time who were kind of like our big brothers in the scene, or we saw them as that. And I think they just saw us as like little flies that they should, like swat away. But there was this local band at that time called the Deftones
Wow.
that really inspired us when we were starting out. You know what I mean? Like we would go see them play like in 1993 at Berkeley Square in the Bay Area, which is like a little tiny, like 100-person club. You know what I mean? It's where Primus recorded Suck on This, like their live record. Just a small little, just a little shithole, really, dude. But it was amazing. It was beautiful.
So this is before their
sacred
album
ground.
Adrenaline comes out?
Yeah, before Adrenaline, for sure. And they sounded like, it's crazy because they were on their way, like when you think of Adrenaline, like everyone thinks like that's like their first kind of taste of Deftones or what Deftones was going to become. But before that, there was a lead up to that sound as well. They weren't like fully formed. Like even in Adrenaline, they weren't fully formed, but the seed was there, right? But I remember Deftones when they had even more like Bad Brains and reggae kind of in the music. They had like a straight up reggae song, like a hip hop song. And they were just like the local heroes like in the scene. But Sacramento had such a great scene at that time too. There was another band called Far that was amazing. Sean Lopez from Crosses was the guitar player for that band. Jonah Matrenga. Who else? There's like a lot of great hip hop.
I remember at the time where you guys broke through with Infest, and we'll dive into Infest in a second.
Sure.
I remember hearing that you guys were, the band Pop Roach was really good friends with Alien Ant Farm. Was that another band that was around your area at that time?
Yes, actually, we got to know Alien Ant Farm through a one of our earliest fans was this dude named Jeff Thoreen that everyone called him Cadaver. And we had a PO box that we, if you sign up to our mailing list, you can also send correspondence through a PO box. And one day I opened the mail and there's a couple of tapes, this fan had sent us. He was from Orange County, Southern California, and he sent us these demo tapes. And one of them was Alien Ant Farm, and the other was Head PE. And then both of those tapes had contact numbers, and we at that time we were so hungry and determined, and like our drive, like our hustle game was just on point, like we were on fire, right? So we're like, as soon as I heard these tapes, I was like, we need to like set up shows with these bands, like we need to go down, and then maybe we could trade shows with them in Northern California. And that's kind of how we were doing it back in the day. We're swapping shows, growing our fan bases, cross-pollinating fan bases. And so I called the number, and I called both. And that began like, I'm still friends with the guys in Head and all the guys in Ant Farm, like to this day. But that's how that happened. And we had gone down after we had gotten our touring, was setting up the show swap kind of thing. We were down in Southern California playing. We were opening for Ant Farm. I forget where the venue was. Maybe it might have been like somewhere in Orange County somewhere. And we were staying at Dryden's house after the show. We were all crafting at Dryden's pad, and we were up late. We may have had a few drinks in us, you know what I mean? And somewhere in our conversation, we thought it would be a great idea to make a blood pact that if the first one of our two bands to get signed would help the other band get signed as well. And we did the whole thing, like we like did the Native America, like you
Blood
said,
Brothers.
like Blood Brothers. And then there's a song on Infest called Blood Brothers, and that's what that song's about.
Wow. And
Yeah.
you guys actually came through with that promise, because both bands were signed to DreamWorks and both went on to sell millions of records. So that's pretty awesome. You guys weren't joking when you did the Blood Brothers pact. It was serious.
We didn't play, dude. That means something, dude. You know what I mean? Like a Blood Brother pact is some real shit. So we took that to heart.
So we're gonna dive into getting signed to DreamWorks in a second, but you were talking about Head PE. So I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't get a quote from Wesley Gear, the guitar player for Head PE, who also played for Korn. So this is from Wesley. Is Gear the pronounced correctly for the last name?
Wes Gear, you are correct.
Wes Gear.
And, yeah.
All right. So he says that we, Head PE, had the joy of all touring through Europe with Dave when Papa Roach was at the height of the last resort, worldwide domination, which meant we partied. I watched the entire world open for them everywhere we went. I also remember Dave passing out in a club when we went far away from the tour buses, and then we had to scramble to get his ass back to the buses. I remember we were always scared that he would overdose. He and I were the most likely to die dudes on tour. He has always been the sweetest, most down-to-earth guy around. And to get to watch this man conquer his demons and transform the way that he has, it's been so heartwarming and mind-blowing. So that's Wesley Gear from Head PE and Korn, and now he's with the Rock for Recovery Foundation. So that's from Wesley.
Oh man, that's beautiful, dude. Wes, another one of my lifer bros, man. And we share a special bond, all of us. You know what I mean? So that's just, wow, getting like a little. I'm feeling it right now.
Getting in the feels.
So, in the feels. Yeah, man. It's dude, I'm gonna have to call all those guys after I get done with this podcast and be like, you guys are like that. They didn't tell me that they sent in those
the crew showed up for you.
The crew, they showed up, dude. That's amazing. But dude, yeah, dude. Me and Wes and the rest of the Head, Papa Roach and Head Camp, like we ran amok in Europe for basically, I think we toured for like 2 years with them. We almost spent all of 2000 and 2001, like from the second half of 2000 all the way through 2001. We basically toured with Head the most, I think, out of any other band.
So you guys released the independent album in 1997. Then you release a couple EPs. These EPs do well, and they catch the attention of Warner Music. So Warner is interested. They decide to pay for a 5-song demo, and if they like what they hear on the demo, then maybe they would sign you guys for your major label debut. So you guys record and give back a demo that has the following 5 songs: Last Resort, Broken Home, Between Angels and Insects, Dead Cell, and She Loves Me Not. So these are the 4 singles from Infest and the first single from Love, Hate, Tragedy. You gave them literally a greatest hits album back, and they didn't sign you guys. Do you think that 25 years later that Warner Music, somebody is losing sleep at night?
Well, first of all, shout out to Jeffrey Weiss at Warner, who was the A&R that signed us to that deal. And during the course of that deal, he had left the company. And so we really didn't have a champion there, so when we went to go submit that demo, Jeffrey wasn't there, so ultimately they ended up passing, which, is correct. But if I'm not mistaken, right, at the same time they passed on us, they signed a little band called Hybrid Theory, which went on to become Linkin Park. And I believe they signed Disturbed at the same time that they passed on us. So I think WMG's doing okay. I don't think anyone's losing any sleep that they passed on us. But we're grateful because where we ended up, like DreamWorks Record, couldn't ask for a better label to be at. I mean, the guy that signed us, Ron Handler, he saw the vision right away. He could see the playing field and knew that that we were a bet worth taking, and it paid off. You know what I mean? So shout out to Ron Handler too. Amazing.
So you signed to DreamWorks in 2000. You released the major label debut album, Infest. I've gone over already the four big singles. It peaks at number 5, 4.2 million copies sold. It ended up being the 20th highest selling album period in the US that year, which is there's like, I don't know, 10,000 albums released. Like, it's unbelievable. How old were you when that album released? I mean, what, no human being, almost no human being will ever know what it's like to have an album that successful, to have, singles that successful. And it all happened to you at a very young age. So how old were you? And can you put into words what your life was like during that insanity around 2000?
Dude, I want to say when the album dropped, I think I was 24 years old. 24, maybe 20. Yeah, 24, I want to say. And then my birthday is in May. So right around the album, my birthday was right after the album had dropped. And I remember going to, we had done a show the night of my birthday, and everyone sang, happy birthday to me on stage and stuff. And then we went out to a club afterwards. And when we were at the club, we got a phone call from our manager. So this is literally, my birthday is at the end of May. The album came out April 25th. And it's my birthday night, like a month later, and our manager called and said, your album just went gold. And we're like, what? Like, are you kidding? Like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. Our manager was Brett Baer at the time. We're like, Brett, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, just didn't know what to do with that information. You know what I mean? And then literally, I think 2 weeks later, it was platinum. And then it was double platinum. And then it was triple platinum. I mean, it was boom. Like, I don't know how to process any of that. Like, it almost like it didn't even seem real, like that could even happen to our little garage band from Vacaville, you know?
Yeah, so I was 15 when the album came out. And so behind me, you can see, in your honor, I have the album cover right here. So these are the my 12 favorite albums from guests that I've had on the podcast. So I had yours made in advance, so it was ready for this interview. And man, that when that album came out, it, with the music video, with the single, everything, that took over the world. Like, this was like a phenomenon, to the point where on Thursday night, I brought my parents to a concert in Ottawa. So Big Sugar was playing, big platinum Canadian band here. And on the drive, I said, hey, I got the Big Papa Roach interview on Saturday. I go, you definitely know some of their songs. So I play, these are like, my parents are pushing 70, and I play Last Resort. So just the acapella vocal starts, like, no, we don't know this. Then the drums kick in. No, we don't know this. As soon as that iconic guitar riff came in, they go, oh, we know this song. And my 70-year-old parents. So to show you how big that was. At what point did you know that this album was something monstrously big? You mentioned that after your birthday, after a month, it was gold, all that stuff. Was there something before that told you that this was going to be massive? Were there projections for album sales? Were there the single starting to pick up at radio? Was there kind of something, a calm before the storm, that gave you a hint that this was coming?
The only thing that I can remember was, and I think, like, looking back on it now and listening to some of the stories that I get told, like, I guess there was a buzz around the industry, or at least around Hollywood, like when we were in the studio with Jay Baumgartner, like, we were kind of like, people were saying that we were kind of the golden boys of that time. Like, we were like kind of like, the hot new thing, at least around Hollywood. People were talking, you know what I mean? But that's just talk, that's not any, doesn't mean
That's
a
not
whole
sales
lot.
numbers, right?
Yeah, it's not sales. There's nothing proven in that, you know what I mean? So, okay, like, whatever, but we weren't even aware of that. I didn't find that out till later. And then I think if there's anything that to me seemed like it was an indicator of anything, was that when the album dropped, our first week sales, we had the we broke the record for the amount of record sales for a brand new signed, like newly signed artist, like, first time debut album, new signing. And then the previous record holder was Slipknot, which they sold 15,000 records on the release of their debut record. Like the first week, they sold 15,000, and we had doubled that. We sold 30,000 records, and they're like, "Oh shit, you guys just this is like some real shit. Like you just broke." I mean, but just like to kind of put it in perspective, like even Slipknot wasn't Slipknot back then. Like it wasn't. It was different times, so everyone was kind of coming up together, right? But Slipknot had definitely proven themselves because their album came out a year before ours did. So they were on their way, but they weren't like the behemoth yet that they are today, right? Which is amazing to think about because it's a huge band, a great band. But anyway, we shattered that record. We doubled it. We sold 30,000, and other than that, everything seemed like it was. I mean, I don't know if there was conversations in the background that were happening, like internally at the company or just in the industry itself. But to us, it just seemed like we were on the road, playing shows night to night, club to club, city to city, and just doing it organically. That's what it felt like to us. You know what I mean? Except for every time we'd roll into a new town or like on our second tour around the States, we noticed that like our first tour, there was maybe like 5, 10 people at a show, depending on the city. Like if we had never been there, there may have been like 5 or 10 people there. You know what I mean? Like, looking at you, St. Louis, Missouri, you know what I mean? And then by the second time we came around, which is only a few months later, sold out show. Also looking at St. Louis, there's a club called Pop. I think we sold out Pop our second time playing in St. Louis. Amazing. And like that's kind of how it felt. It just felt like things were happening organically. You know what I mean? But I definitely still was not ready for. I wasn't ready for gold in a month and platinum in a month and a half and double platinum in 2 months and all of that. That's some different level stuff.
I don't know why I still remember this all these years later, but I remember in 2000 reading a review about someone that had, a professional in the industry that was writing a review about that album Infest, and it's always stuck with me. I don't know why. It's like the one review that's always stuck with me. And this is what the headline said before you read it. It said, once I've picked my jaw up off the floor, I'll finish telling you how great this album is. That was the quote for Infest before reading the review. And I don't know why, but that to me, that was like the best review intro ever. So
that's wild. I wish I had seen that interview or seen that article back in the day, because I don't know if it's just me and my personality, but it seemed like I only read that the reviews that were like trashing the album. I remember I forget which magazine in the UK, like our album comes out there. They're like, Papa Roach has a band is like a barn door hitting a barn door. Like they were basically, I think they said that we were flogging. I forget what the terminology was, but they were just like they were clowning everything we did. And I was like, oh, my feelings are hurt. I'm so butthurt. But yeah, dude, like that. Once I picked up my jaw off the floor, I'll tell you how great this record is. That's amazing. That's great.
That's a good one. I
wish I had tuned into more of those. Maybe it's better that I didn't tune into the positive reviews. Maybe it's better.
We don't want the ego.
Everything happened. Big, Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. There was plenty of time for that happen as my career went on, which it did.
Yeah. There's one magazine that did that did appreciate the album. So Kerrang! Put it on its list of the 21 greatest nu metal albums of all time. I was curious, what are your thoughts on the labeling of nu metal? It seems like everything after Korn for like a decade was labeled nu metal. Did you guys agree that you were nu metal? Was that a real thing? Do you see that as a derogatory term? Like, what are your thoughts on nu metal? Because it seems like nu metal isn't something that gets labeled now anymore.
Right. It's definitely a genre of a time, right? It's those late 90s, early 2000s.
Korn, Limp Bizkit, Disturbed, Papa Roach.
Disturbed, yeah. Linkin Park, right? So even like, you want to talk about like Fold, Stained, Deadlights, you know, like we all know the Crazy Town, right? Crazy Town.
Yeah.
But so I think at the time, I think that we kind of took it as a slight a little bit, because we're like, we just didn't understand that, like, people, society, like people, like they like to group things, like to put things in boxes, right? So like we're like, we were so fiercely trying to be like our own thing that we're like, you're not gonna put us in a box with everybody else. And now I kind of look back on it and I'm like, that's a cool box. I'll take that. It's great. I think our attitudes toward that label have changed over the years. And I think the attitude of, so now that a lot of those fans who were kids at the time our record came out, now they're all moms and dads. And there's a bit of nostalgia around that, around that genre and around those bands and around that term. I think there's a different perspective and new eyes that are looking at it a different way. And so to some of the younger kids who kind of have discovered that genre and are just now finding out about these bands, which I guess would be their version of classic rock, right?
We're back to classic rock.
We're back to classic rock. I think when they hear or see new metal, I don't think they see it as being derogatory, even though, like, we're all kind of, everyone, I think, in the genre, if I remember correctly, just like, whether I read it in an interview or was talking to guys and girls, ooh, Kitty, right? Like, remember Kitty? Like, they were in that
female fronted.
Seven Dust. Dude, Human Waste Project was do you remember them? Amy Echo was the singer for them. Her Satana. Anyway.
I think it's just a timestamp, just like
the timestamp, dude. That's what it is.
A timestamp, and new metal was a timestamp. So, yeah,
people like to put things in genres. You know what I mean? Like, freedom rock, heavy metal, classic rock. You know what I mean? Psychedelic rock, new metal. It's just a label that you can kind of. It's a marker in history.
Yeah, well, your sound matured as the albums went on. So after the first couple albums, you guys weren't technically considered new metal anyways,
Yeah, that's true. Like when we went in, when I remember the band had made a conscious decision that, like we're like, and looking back on it, I'm like, was it necessarily the correct decision? I mean, everything happens for a reason and everything happens as it should, but was it the best idea? Like, I look at other bands who have maybe if we had just kind of repeated the recipe, like rinse and repeat Infest, like there's some other bands who are very successful that kind of like they took what worked on the first album and just basically did it again for the second album, and it worked great. You know what I mean? Like, great for the record sales of Pocketbook. But us being the knuckleheads we're like, no, dude, like we just want to switch it up. Like we're at that point, like if you listen to our EPs before we got signed, we had already started kind of veering off the rap rock sound. Like we were experimenting with other sounds, like Social Distortion was a big influence for especially Kobe. He really loved Mike Ness and Social Distortion. And so some of that, like I guess like Southern Cali, like or whatever, like kind of punk rock, like we were doing like some more punk stuff, you know what I mean? That was less rap influenced. And we're just like, dude, let's just switch it up for the second record, Love, Hate, Tragedy. Like, we're just gonna switch up the sound. We only had one song that had rap on it, and that was She Loves Me Not, which was written for Infest, right? And everything else, everything, like we kind of just switched up the whole recipe. It's like if someone like went to McDonald's and got a Big Mac and was like, ooh, I really like this Big Mac. That's awesome. I'm going to go back and get another Big Mac. And then they went back the next day to get a Big Mac. And it was like a freaking chicken ranch bacon sandwich. And they called it a Big Mac. Like we switched up the whole recipe. But that's what we wanted to do. And looking back on it too, I credit the label because for better or worse, our label was supportive of us as artists and as a band, right? No one was like, hey, you have to like do Infest Part 2. They were like, do whatever you want. You just won the lottery, dude. Like, do whatever you feel. You're artist. And that that was the culture at DreamWorks, was that they were just supportive of artists. You know what I mean? They weren't all about, of course, they're a business, they want to make money, but their artists, like their support of like the artistic endeavor was above all else. You know what I mean? So I think, Love, Hate, Tragedy, we kind of took a dip a little bit. It wasn't as big and massive as Infest, but I think what that did was, looking back on the catalog now in the career, it opened up a door where, like, I think Tobin says in interviews, or I said it before, he said the only thing consistent with our band is that we're always changing. And if you look at Papa Roach now that they're like, what, 10 11 albums in, maybe even 12. I can't even keep track of how many albums they put out now, but they're all different. They're all their own things. Sometimes they revisit themes, from older albums, or sometimes they're just like opening up new doors that we want to try this. We want to try dubstep now. Now we want to try this, that, and the other thing. But I think doing that early on in our career kind of opened that door. Like we didn't have to stay locked into one thing. You know what I mean? It was just make the music that speaks to you personally as a band,
Yeah, I have a lot of questions and a lot of comments for Love, Hate, Tragedy. So we'll get to that in a couple minutes. I have a few questions about Last Resort, and there's some fan questions. So can you share with our listeners how the song Last Resort came together? Do you remember the first time hearing that iconic guitar riff, or the first time hearing those vocals that kick off the song? Like where does that song piece together to the song that it is today? And then I have lots of questions about Last Resort after that as well.
Okay, I won't be as long-winded on answering this question, but I remember the first time I heard Jacoby's vocal for that song, it was actually in a different song. I can tell you that. So imagine that. And then the first time I heard the riff for Last Resort, right? That like, I know in an interview on Vice, I called it an arpeggio, and then someone in the comment thread was like, "It's not a fucking arpeggio, dude. Like, I thought you were a musician." I'm like, "Sorry, dude. I'm a drummer. What do you want? Like, just shoot me, please." But so the first time I heard that arpeggio, Mr. Whatever, who you are in the comment thread, it was actually on the piano. Like Tobin had written it on his mom's grand piano at his mom's house, and he played it for me. And he the way he presented it was like, "Yeah, dude, it's kind of like this Lauryn Hill Fugees kind of a vibe." And he played it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's dope." You know what I mean?
Dude, is there an acoustic version of this somewhere? A piano-based acoustic version?
I think someone. I think there's a video of Tobin playing it on his piano at his home, somewhere in I think it's in this Vice mini doc that they put out last year. But then there's other on YouTube. I know I've seen like people have taken that story now, and like they've now transcribed it like that to piano. Like I've seen some classical versions. I know there's like a violin version, like a string quartet version of Last Resort. Yeah, so there's different versions of that song out there, but that's the way I heard it the first time, was on piano. And then when I heard we gave it the riff to Jerry, and then he learned it and put his Jerry-ness on it, and it's like, oh, that's pretty sick. We called the riff the noodle. We're like, play the noodle, Jerry, play the noodle. That was it. Yeah, Last Resort.
I think a big part of what makes that song awesome is your drums. So you have the drums in the intro, and also on the chorus, it's like a forward drum playing. It's like down on the one, and those, to me, those help the song stand out and make it what it is. Do you remember coming up with your drum parts for that song after hearing the guitar riff, the noodle, the arpeggio, however you want to call that guitar riff?
Yeah, I remember at the time, I don't remember the exact moment I came up with those drum parts, but I remember at the time the general philosophy in our camp was some advice from our manager, our two managers, Brett and Gary. And they would say, just write hits. That was their big, we're like, Brett, like, what are we doing? He's like, I don't know. Like, we got the demo deal for Warner Brothers. We're like, what do we do? Like, like we don't like this is big and scary and new to us. We don't know what to do. And Brett's like, just write hits. It's cool. And so like we just like took that and internalized that one statement. And I'm like, I remember thinking like, and then the other thing was like arena rock, right? So it's like simple drum part. Like I've never been a very technical or very like I don't subdivide measures. For me, it's all about just placing single notes where single notes and then fills for embellishment, but it's just putting the beat where I feel it needs to be. Like my playing, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on my playing because I've heard it from multiple singers. They're like, "Dude, you have great feel." Like, I think if there's anything I bring to the table as a drummer, it's feel. They're like, my friend Lucas Rossi, who I've made a lot of music with. He's like, "Dude, playing with you is like sitting in like your favorite comfy sofa because you never have to worry about where the support's coming. Like you're just fully supported." You know what I mean? And that's the way he sees my playing. And I'm like, that's a pretty good analogy. So that for me, that's the drum parts. That's like the drum parts all over that record. It's like, where can I put the beats in the right place to be the glue that holds the music, like the guitar, bass, and vocals together. I don't just listen to the rhythm and just the guitar or just the bass, even though I do lock in with the bass and there is a lot of lock in with the guitar, but I listen to the vocals as well. Like, and even like I just did a song the other day for a friend of mine out in Texas, my friend Billy Curd out in Texas, and he's like, "Dude, play drums on the song for me." He sends me everything, the song, everything but the drums, right? And like it's that's just the way my mind works. I'm listening to like I listen to what the song wants and what the vocal needs, and I just try and support that. I just try and support the song the best I can.
So
that's the story.
Last Resort on Spotify alone has 852 million streams, and in the music video on YouTube has 192 million views. So that's a billion listens to that song just on the two platforms. Maybe there's, I don't know, 500 million on Apple, who knows? So at least a billion. Why do you think people love Last Resort so much? I know why I love it. Why do you think that song just is this global phenomenon?
So what you're telling me is that like me putting my phone on repeat on Spotify, it worked?
Yes, infinite
yes,
repeat.
Dude, yeah. I knew it would. I had my phone on Spotify on infinite repeat. Got those streams up, baby.
A billion, baby. 1 billion.
I knew I could do it. I knew I did it. Awesome. Dude, I don't know, man. That's like, when you start throwing numbers at me, I could hear it and I could take in the information, but processing that, like there's just, at a certain point, it's like I don't know what to do with that information. You know what I mean? It's beautiful. It's great. It's great news. And I'm grateful. Absolutely. Absolutely grateful. But other than that, it's might as well exist in some other world. That's just not,
yeah,
I don't know what to do with that.
When you think of a big number, you think, okay, an arena is 20,000 people. So you can visualize 20,000. You're like, wow, that's an incredible amount of people. And now from 20,000, how are you supposed to visualize a billion? Like it doesn't, we cannot compute the success of that song, essentially.
No, I think I don't know if you heard like this before. They said, but if a dollar is 1 second, right? $1 million would be like 13 hours or 11 hours, and $1 billion would be like 31 years, right? So like just use that, that kind of math. It's insane.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have fun with this next question because in 81 interviews, I always ask, hey, if Guitar Hero came along and requested just one song from your band, what song do you provide to the video game? And this is the first time in 81 interviews that my guest, their song is actually in Guitar Hero. So Last Resort was in Guitar Hero 5. So I don't have to ask what song would you submit because you actually had a song in there. So what was that experience like? And then the other question, this is a fan question also about video games. This is from Michel Perron. He says, how does it feel to have your song Blood Brothers? We mentioned that on the greatest video game soundtrack ever, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. So 2 video game questions for our video game nerd listeners here.
Oh, dude, Michelle, thanks for that question and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, dude, Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I played that game when it came out, and it was, like I think was it PS2 when that came
So
out?
the original one was PS1, and then Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was PS2, and they were both
Two,
like
right?
groundbreaking games. Yeah.
Groundbreaking, dude. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I remember at that time, we had done the Warp Tour, and it was cool because it kind of brought me back to like my childhood, like, my love of skateboarding, and then Tony Hawk, and just to have that be a part of that game. And I believe it's one of the it's like one of the earlier songs that unlocks as you play the game. It's like you don't have to like, I know certain songs you have to reach higher levels to unlock them. Like ours is right up front.
I remember hearing that song in the game when I played it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean it's awesome. It's awesome. And then Guitar Hero, I've played some Guitar Hero along the way. I never got a chance to play our song in Guitar Hero though. So I don't know what that would feel like, but I think it would be awesome. I think
I wonder what it would feel like for your guitarist who actually wrote that riff,
Oh, hilarious. Hilarious.
It'd be cool to see him actually play it on like expert. He can play it in real life, but can't quite play it in the game. That would be pretty funny.
I always think of that, like, or they have what's the game that has the full setup where you have
Rock
like, the
Band.
drums, Rock Band, right? So imagine like playing my own song on Rock Band or something like that and then like failing. Hilarious. But yeah, I don't know, man. That's great. It's so cool for something that we created, something that I helped create, to kind of like that it's found its way like into the fabric of culture, of pop culture or whatever. Like it's kind of just found its way into like little different nooks and crannies, like video games and movies and memes. Last resort is a meme now, which is, at first, like, I didn't know how to take it. And I think, we had some conversations, like me and the band were like, I think the band didn't really understand. Like, what do you mean? It's like, why is it a meme? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I know it seems bad, but really it's good. Like, trust me, it's going to be awesome. And they're like, okay. I'm like, dude, just let go and like, let it roll. And that's the approach we've taken with it. And some of these memes are amazing. I think Snoop Dogg posted a meme of like Snoop Dogg has memed it. There's different variations of like, cut my pie into pizza, cut my pie into pizza. This is my plastic fork or something like that. It's fucking great. And I think the band even now has merch around some of the memes from the band. I have a blanket at my house that was like the guys gave it to me for Christmas or for my birthday this year. And it's a custom made collaboration with this company that makes like food related products. And so it's like charcuterie, the stuff you'd see on a charcuterie board, like grapes and cheese and bread. And it's embroidered into this blanket. It says, cut my life into pieces. This is my, cut my life into pieces. I should go get it. I wish I would have thought to bring it. I could show it to you on screen. It's pretty awesome.
That's all good. I saw the band Papa Roach themselves posted a meme the other day. It's a video of, it says how to piss off your Nigerian parents. And it's this guy that puts in piercings and then he runs into the room and starts a cappella screaming, cut my life into pieces. He starts singing the song and you see the parents just like cringing. So anyways, and the band shared it themselves. Awesome. So they're definitely in on it. So I have one final question about Infest.
Sure.
So that album, you guys got 2 Grammy nominations. So Best New Artist and for the music video, this was for Broken Home. Man, that is the highest level of honor that you can get as a musician. That's like the most esteemed nomination period. You got not 1 but 2 for the same album. What do those nominations mean to you, if anything?
Well, I have them on my wall. I don't know if you can see that right here, 1 and 2, and then we didn't win the award, but we got a nominate for being nominated. You get a medal. So I framed those. They're hanging on the wall of my office. And so I think, at the time, it was once again like we were young and punk rock, and we were so contrarian to everything. I think at that time they were like, I think Kobe had said like, oh, like we got nominated for a Grammy. That's, who'll be impressed? My Grammy, like my grandma. And like, we kind of were, I think at the time, it's not that we didn't care, but we were trying to take everything with a grain of salt because it just didn't seem real. You know what I mean? And we didn't know how to process it. So we just kind of like Blink when it, if you look at like comparatively like Blink 182, how like everything's a joke. You know what I mean? Like in our own little way, we were like kind of taking the piss out of everything, But looking back, I mean, yeah, it's one of the moments I could, it's one of my trophies now. It's cool. It's cool. And then all these things back there, you can see them back there. But yeah, it's part of my life, it's part of my journey. So I like to acknowledge it. There was a time when I didn't have these things hanging up. I had like in a garage and storage, you know what I mean? And it's like I don't need those things up, whatever. And then one day I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna throw them on the wall. I like the way they look. Pretty cool.
So we're going to move on to the follow-up to Infest. So in 2002, you guys released Love, Hate, Tragedy. You had talked a little bit about the album a few minutes ago. So we have about 30 minutes left, and I have page after page of questions for each of the next three albums. So I'll have to just cherry pick a few questions for each album.
Okay, let's do that, and I'll try and answer more concisely. I know I've been doing a horrible job so far.
No, you're giving us the goods. This is a deep dive, man. You're doing a deep dive. Yeah, it's perfect. So Love, Hate, Tragedy comes out. Two singles, She Loves Me Not and Time Again. The album goes gold, debuts at number 2. So this is like the highest charting album. And even though you were saying, it wasn't quite as successful as Infest, it still went on to sell like 3 million copies globally. Like it for any other band, that's like the biggest album of their career by far. After the multi-platinum success of Infest, did you guys feel a ton of pressure when you went in to make this follow-up?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think I mentioned it before, is that if there was any pressure, it wasn't being placed on us from the label or our management. You know what I mean? They kind of just said like, it's your career, like do what you want, like do what makes you creatively happy and fulfilled, right? So if there was any pressure, it was kind of on our own shoulders. We like, you know what I mean? And I think our answer to that was just like sloughing it off and saying, all right, new metal, rap metal, we did that. Cool story, like we're gonna do something else. And that's Love, Hate, Tragedy. It was our answer to being pigeonholed in the rap metal, because that was important to us at this time. And it's funny, like Tobin, when he recounts like the making of that record, he's like, we had just basically like won the Super Bowl of like new, the new bands, right? Biggest moment in history. We were successful, we're like rock stars now, and we were fucking miserable. You know what I mean? And that's the sentiment that we brought into writing Love, Hate, Tragedy, because a lot of those songs are all about being on the road, being away from home, being depressed, fighting with your loved one because you're away from you're apart for so long and on the road. And it's kind of I think it's a story that it's kind of recounted. A lot of bands make those same records. Like you have your first record, and then the second record is being about being sad because you're on the road all the time. You know what I mean? That's Love, Hate, Tragedy in a nutshell.
And if the song She Loves Me Not is good enough to be the first single off that album, why wasn't it included on Infest?
It was because even though we had written it in those sessions, right? When we were, like the whole game plan for Infest was like, all right, let's the album, we wanted the album to be cohesive, right? And so if you kind of look at She Loves Me Not as a song, it's kind of the outlier among that group of songs. Like it's got melody, And so we kind of felt like we had the melodic part of that of Infest covered with songs like Binge and Never Enough, right? That's about as melodic as we wanted to get. So if we had stuck She Loves Me Not in there, and then also She Loves Me Not's a little bit more funky and up tempo, right?
Yeah.
And so we just felt like it was right there. It was like right on the cusp of fitting in, but it just didn't make the cut.
Hmm.
But we love the song, so we saved it for the next record.
So yeah, sonically, Love Hate Tragedy is very different than Infest. So if I can make a comparison, stick with me. You were talking about loving grunge and Nirvana. If Infest was comparing with Nirvana, if it was Nevermind, then your next album, Love Hate Tragedy, is like In Utero, where it's way more raw, it's less polished. Your drums, they're so raw. Like the snare on Life is a Bullet is just this powerful cutting snare. Was that a conscious choice to, maybe looking at Infest and saying it's so polished, like it sounds sonically perfect, let's go like very raw, and maybe that's like a love letter to all the bands you grew up with that were a lot more raw. I don't know if any of that is making sense, but that's when I listen to Love Hate Tragedy, I'm hearing a shift sonically from Infest.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Although it's more melodic, it is more raw, and we kind of took a more old school approach. Like the producer that we hired to do that record is Brendan O'Brien, who he did Stone Temple Pilots' first record. He did most of the Rage Against, I think most, if not all, the Rage Against the Machine records. Did some Pearl Jam records. He was the engineer on Blood Sugar Sex Magic, the Chili Peppers album. So he like we knew the name, we knew his work, and we cherry picked him to do the second record, like on purpose, because we knew he would take us in the direction we wanted to go. And he's heavily inspired from like the older recording techniques of like using real tape and like less computer processing. Like I remember when we went into the studio, like Brendan was like, when he came to talk to me about doing my drum tracks, and he's like, Dave, like he's like, I know, because at that time Pro Tools had made its entry into the industry, and Infest is pro. It's not. It's funny because when I listen to Infest now, and we thought like, oh my god, it's like Pro Tools to death, and you look at it now, it's like that ain't nothing, baby. Like if you knew how records are made now, it's like, why does anyone even play an instrument anymore? I have no idea. It's like, everything's just like plug it in the computer and it's all in the box now. But so even though we felt like Infest had a ton of Pro Tools on it, we go back and listen to it now and it sounds so raw, right? But with Love Hate Tragedy, it's even more raw because the only thing we used Pro Tools for was we recorded everything to tape and then dumped it into Pro Tools. And we didn't do any drum editing. So Brendan, when he came to talk to me about my drum tracks, he goes, listen, man, like, I'm not going to sit here and quantize all your beats. And I'm not going to like replace all the sounds with different sounds. Like, if you want a certain sound out of your snare and your drum, we have to tune them that way in the studio. You have to play it. If like he thought, if you're not happy with the way it sounded and the way you played it, he's like, play it again. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm not going to see. So the most I will do is I'll take one half of one take and maybe another half of another take and put them together. So that's all I'm doing for you. He's like, I'm not going to like, sit here and doctor up all your drums. So if you want it to sound how you want it to sound, you're going to have to play it that way. That's the old school approach. And I'm like, okay. And like, I did my best to rise to that challenge. And so when you hear the record, it's all everything on that record. I like to let the fans know, or the listeners know, that like everything on that record it's all like, like one, huge chunks, like one takes. Not a whole lot of there's not a lot of processing on that record at all. It's very, very old school approach to recording.
So I have some kind words sent here from Renee Matta. So this is the singer for Reach NYC, music executive, helped get some pretty big bands signed, including Maroon 5, Lovely the Band, and Albert Hammond Jr. So these are some words from Renee. Renee says, I remember the day I met Dave Buckner. It was April 15th, 2000, very specific, at CBGB's in New York City. We've been friends and brothers since then. Dave Buckner was a vital part of Papa Roach's success and vision. His drive was ferocious, which is comparable to his friendship. He's loyal, dependable, unwavering. We've been through ups and downs, through the darkness and the light. He will be a brother until the day I die. From Renee.
Renee's my boy, dude. That's my dude. That's my guy, my Mamba. That's dude. Yeah, and he's right. Like we, our band. I'm trying to remember if Papa Roach, if his band Reach opened for Papa Roach at CBGB's on April 15th, or if we opened for his band. I can't remember, but it was one of those two. But that's when we first met Renee. Was we had the opportunity to play our one and only time ever playing CBGB's legendary venue, right? And we had one shot at playing there before they closed up shop. But I put that on my bucket list. And Renee, once again, another lifer. He's a great dude. Great dude.
And CBGB's, that's famous for like the Ramones, right?
Dude, I think even like
early
Ramones,
early rock, and
I think like Ramones, like I think even like Talking Heads and a lot of that like that early punk rock came out of there. That New York stuff. Yeah.
So in 2004, you guys released Getting Away with Murder. So 3 singles, Getting Away with Murder, Scars, and Take Me. This is a big hit, goes platinum. I want to talk about the song Scars. So Scars is another departure sonically. It was the band's biggest hit in the US. Was there any fear releasing a song that wasn't quite as heavy and had a lot of melody to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We were scared shitless of that song. We were so apprehensive about putting a song that melodic out into the world that the original bridge to that song had like a hardcore breakdown for whatever reason. And then at the end of the day, like, at the fourth down, making the demo of that record, I was like, this album, because I was in charge of recording the demos. So we recorded them on my Pro Tools at my house in Sacramento. And we had this hardcore breakdown in the middle of Scars, and I'm like, let's pull this out. And I put in that bridge, that what we know of as the bridge today, where it kind of like there's like these one hits, like where Kobe's like screaming, "Go, fix your style," right? That part. And then I kind of constructed that part in Pro Tools, and I'm like, okay, guys, what about this? And they're like, and I remember like when we first heard, just like the song in total, like it was scary how poppy, right, that song was for us. Like we've always written melodic, catchy songs. I think I think it's pretty safe to say like I don't know if I've ever heard a Papa Roach song with me or after me that isn't catchy. Like, that's pretty much that's how that camp rolls. You know what I mean? Like, write catchy music. But that one was, we knew that if we put that out there, we're taking a step. But that song was one of those songs, like some songs they feel like you're building something, and then other songs feel like you're discovering something, like you're almost like you're digging. And that song, like, just basically like it forced its way. Like I don't even really know how it was, just like some kismet, I think they call it, like just meant to be shit. Where like that song, Jerry brought that one in.
It was like a gift. It was like a gift.
It was a gift
that you were downloading from infinite intelligence or the source or God. It just came to you. It was out there somewhere in the ether, and you guys were the medium in which it presented itself, essentially.
Yeah, that's kind of my general philosophy for all of music creation. You know what I mean? I feel like if I'm doing my job as a musician, it's being a conduit for that, bringing whatever exists in the invisible, bringing it into this reality. But that song when it presented itself to us. We knew, like, that was, so Last Resort, I didn't necessarily know was going to be a hit when we wrote it. That song I knew was going to be a hit. I
Yeah,
knew it. I knew it from the minute we finished it.
that chorus,
Yeah.
that big pop, undeniable chorus with harmonies. Yeah, I have a story about Scars that I think you'll enjoy. So I love Scars. Like, that's one of my most ever played songs. My band used to cover that song at every show, and we played it so much that this actually happened. I had a girl, a long-term girlfriend at the time, who calls me hysterical, like couldn't be happier, and goes, "Oh my God, your song's playing on the radio." So she worked retail, and she goes, "Your song's on the radio," and she holds it up, and it was Scars, and we had been playing Scars so much that she thought we were getting radio play. So that's a little story
Dude,
about Scars and us playing that. So
and of course you took the credit, right? You're like, thanks, babe.
oh yeah, it's one of her
Yeah,
best
I'm
songs.
stoked.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, that's great, dude. That's an awesome story. I love that. I love that.
So let's move on to the Paramore sessions in 2006. So this is your last album with the band. 4 singles: "To Be Loved," "Forever," "Time Is Running Out," and "Reckless." The album is named in reference to the Paramore Mansion. So you guys recorded the album there. Is there anything you can share about that location while recording?
Yeah, we did. We recorded it at the Paramore in LA. And a couple things I can tell you is that it's elevation. Sits on top of a hill in the middle of like the east side of LA, like East Hollywood. It's in the neighborhood of where I was born, right? So the hospital I was born at, literally right down the street from the Paramore. I was born at Queen of Angels Hospital in East Hollywood. And so going back there to record kind of felt like I was able to kind of like do some archaeology into my own life with that, because I would pass by the hospital I was born at. Like every day I would see my window. It sits on top. It's the highest point inside LA city limits. It was built by an heiress named Daisy. I think I want to say Daisy, is it Canfield? Daisy Canfield Danziger, who was married to an actor. And the story of that place, like if you Google that place, it's got a long and like very storied past. You know what I mean? Like it's been a reform. I want to say a reform school for wayward kids. It's been the nuns. There's Catholic. It's been like a nunnery, like a home for nuns, Catholic church. It's been its current owner, Dana, who owns it now, and she owned it when we recorded there. She rents it out for events, and it's like an artist kind of sanctuary. So there's been a ton of artists who've recorded albums there. While we were there recording and writing that, we wrote and recorded the song there, and then did overdubs at Howard Benson's studio in the Valley. But the bulk of the album was recorded there in the house. While we were there, Mars Volta was there working on stuff, right? Chino from the Deftones was writing Saturday Night Wrist there. He was living in one of the auxiliary houses. So like we'd all just be like seeing each other, like milling around, and we'd have dinners and barbecues and things. Sometimes we'd invite the guys over and, come over, like we're cooking carne asada tonight, like let's hang out, whatever. There was a few of those nights there. The place is haunted as fuck. I'll tell you that. Haunted. Straight up.
I've heard stories, and to give our listeners kind of a visual of this mansion, at one point it was listed for sale for like $40 million. So you're thinking of a normal mansion. This is a $40 million mansion. So wild.
It's pretty crazy, man. And the crazy thing about it is, I think because it's a historical landmark. It's got so much personality, and then, yeah, it's an expensive property. I think Katy Perry tried to buy it after, like, I forget, like I ran into Dana a couple years ago, and she was telling me, she's like, I'm in a legal battle right now with Katy Perry. She's trying to buy the Paramore or something like that. Like, so anyway, different story. But it's an amazing place. The vibes in that place, according to Dana, she said that it was designed by Masonic architect, and it sits on top of ley line, if you know what those are. Like, so ley line are like electromagnetic, etheric grid lines that run across Earth, right? So if you get into some more esoteric studies, you'll learn about what ley lines are. And it sits right on top of the intersection of, I want to say, at least two, maybe more ley lines sit around, and the house is sitting on top of that. And so the energy level in that place, you want to talk about being a conduit, like conducting energy. I mean, like, dude, it was game on from the time we walked on that property. And the weird thing is, as soon as you walk in the gate, like our cell phones wouldn't work. And we're like, how come our cell phones don't work? You know, they only work when we go outside the gate. She's like, that's just like, I think Dana ascribed it to the spirits, right, on the property. Like they wouldn't let the cell phone work. So one night I was trying to make a call. I think I was trying to call my parents, and I'm inside my room in the place, and I have no bars. And I literally said out loud, I'm like, could you please just let me call my parents? I'm trying to call my mom and dad, please. But just let me make this one call. And my phone fired up and I was able to complete the call, but I had to like ask the spirit to let me call out, dude. It's wild, dude. So there's a lot of energy on that record in particular. And if I could share a story with you that I don't think I've ever said it in a public interview ever before. I did a lot of the writing, lyrical writing on that record. I contributed a lot to the lyrics and the overall tone and the themes of the songs. Many of the songs, and Kobe will tell you this too. Two of us in the camp were like, Jacoby was sober, but Tobin and I were both going through dark periods in our life. I was the darkest. Right. It was, I was in like, someone called it my rock bottom at that point in my life while I was recording that record, writing that record. And so many of the songs are basically, if not directly, like through channeled energy, like they're telling my story through that period of my life. And the original sequence of the record, which it lives as a playlist on my Spotify channel, I sequenced the album to be a goodbye letter because I knew it was the last letter. It was the last album that I was going to make with the band. Whether or not I left the band or I passed away, I knew it was the last record I would make with the band. And so I sequenced the album that way. And if you listen to the words of the songs in that order, they tell my story.
Wow.
And that's the first time I've ever said that in an interview. So there you go.
Man, that album must have a special place in your heart then.
It does. It is the album that, to me, you know, even though I was there for all of them and I contribute to all of them and I put my heart and soul in it, that one is the closest to my heart out of all the records I did with that band.
In preparation for this interview, I listened to the entire Papa Roach discography several times with some good headphones, and I was really impressed with that album, the Paramore Sessions. And man, To Be Loved is such a powerful opener to the album. And I want to ask you about the snare on that song. Like, that is the most badass snare sound. Is there anything special going on there? How do you get that sound? Is it how hard you're hitting? Is it a certain snare? Is it the mic? Is it mixing? Give me some insider info on how you get that monstrous sound for that song.
Sure. Okay, so when you talk about the snare sound, is it the snare sound from the intro, or is it the snare sound in the body of the song? The intro.
So the intro, where it's basically just the snare is going, is
all right. Like
super badass. Yeah, it's like driving. Like it's the riff and the snare. Just it's this crazy snap. I gotta know more. I don't know, man. That stood out to me.
Okay, so even though that album is, so that album to me, like when I went into making that record and my thought process for that album was like, we were making it in Hollywood, and I said, my thought process for that record, my creative intention was that I said, I want this to be like our dirty rock and roll Sunset Strip record. right? If that makes sense, does that, you know what I mean? So like Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, Motley Crue, Girls, Girls, Girls. To me, that's what that record was going to be, right? And then also this goodbye letter, but it was going to be like this, like there's a lyric in the song, in one of the songs that said, reaching for the stars but laying in the gutter, right? That basically encapsulates that album for me. So the record has a lot of modern day production on it, even though it doesn't sound like it. There's not a lot that like overtly sounds like it's like Pro Tools to shit. There's some keys in it. Howard Benson, our producer, that was our second record with Howard. He's a wizard at bringing in like keypads and the way he records the drums. He records live drums, but then layers samples on top. There's like, for every song, there's probably at least 3 or 4 different drums samples on top of each hit for every drum, right? So that should, but even though you can't really tell in the mix, it just sounds like a nice big fat drum sound. That's the way we recorded that album with Howard. But like I said, the bulk of the main tracking was done in the house with these big open rooms. And so like there's like this big like reverby room echo sound. And you could really, it really comes through on the recording, even though there's a lot of samples, you know, underneath it. You could really hear like all these different things. But funny thing about To Be Loved, and I've also never said this on an interview, the intro to that song where it comes in with the driving drum beat, we wrote that. We had the song originally just started da 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 go da da, and there was no intro to it. That song, that part was constructed and written after we had already packed up all the gear after recording the drums, right? So that whole intro isn't even me playing; it's a drum loop.
So I should be giving credit to like a AI drum machine somewhere. Yeah.
It's like BFD or Slate drums or something, but it's a drum loop. I don't. It might even been like one of the guys in the studio created it, but that whole first section before the main body of the song starts isn't even me playing on that. It was written after the fact. So there you go. The record business, baby, making magic.
Yeah, talking about Howard Benson and his layering of drums and using keys and pads, you hear a lot of that with his work with 3 Days Grace.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely something about, and it's the reason why we made 2 records with Howard is there's like Howard got his start in like, I think he started like in aerospace, you know, like he's a rocket scientist, right? Literally. So, and he's like a mad genius. And like when you hear a Howard Benson record, you know it's a Howard Benson record, right? So he's done like My Chem, 3 Days Grace, POD, you know what I mean? And there's a certain flavor to the records he makes that just, it's purely Howard. And that was, at that time, that was the right choice for the records we wanted to make. You know, he was the right guy. So
I have one question about the song Forever, and then we'll move past this album. So I love that song Forever. You're talking about the atmosphere of, you know, being at the mansion and the big open rooms and all that stuff. Man, the atmosphere with the bass and drums on that song, and then the vocals, there's like nice vocals on the guitar, and not the vocal, sorry, the reverb on the vocals and the guitar. It just, in the verse and the intro, there's just this amazing sound. And my question is the song Forever, is that the best ever recorded vocal performance from Jacoby?
Man, I don't know, but I might have a hard time arguing that point. Yeah, it's
like those
deep.
Clean verses.
Yeah.
It's like the tone, the delivery, everything. It stands up there. I'm thinking about like Chris Cornell on some of the Audio Slave songs that have kind of that same atmospheric verse where it's like his vocals are holding everything down. And it's when I hear him sing that verse, it's up there with the best rock singers I've ever heard recorded. So I don't know if I'm giving a compliment or if I'm asking a question, but
Dude, I'll take it either way, man. I see what you're saying. I think even in amongst the body of work of Papa Roach, I mean, like that song has, to my knowledge, I think it's, if it's not the first time we did it, but like there's so much space. Like there's nothing, it's like there's nothing holding that song together. It's drums, it's like these like Native American Indians sounding like, that's the way I wrote that part, was to sound like like a, you ever been to like an Indian powwow and you hear like the drums? You know, like when they have like the group of the guys around the one drum and they're like doing the pounding and singing. That's the way I wrote that part, was to kind of emulate that. So it's just me and then Tobin holding down like the rhythm, right? And then Jerry with that etheric thing. But the main thing that carries that whole part is, so there's so much space in it that you can't help but key into what Jacoby's singing. And that's intentional, right? And even like with the way Howard produces the vocals, very compressed. You hear every breath, every like little lip movement and all the spit swirling around like in the mouth. You know what I'm talking about? It's like that really compressed where you hear every little nuance of the vocal. And that's the first time that I can ever remember us doing something like that. So thank you for the compliment. And that's kind of my version of the story of what that is, that part.
So I have our final fan question and then a final comment sent in. The question is sent in from a band in the Ukraine who's gone through a lot in the last few months. The band is called Cardinal Birds, and this is their question. Do you still hang out with the other members of Papa Roach? And if not, which member do you miss the most?
Dude, matter of fact, I do. I do hang out with the guys. They were just at my house. I live in Boise, Idaho now. And over summer, they came through on tour. The Rockzilla tour came through Boise, and we had a big barbecue at my house. You know, we swam in the pool, we ate carne asada. You know, everyone was having a great time, and it wasn't even their day off. Like they like took time out of their day to come over to the crib, have a hang, and then left my house and went and played a show. And for me, just that, it's one of those special days that I don't get to see him that often anymore, because of everyone lives in different parts of the country now. And I think even Jerry, like, you know, like Tobin lives in Austin, Jerry's in like Nashville, Tony, and even like Jacoby and Tony live at different parts of, both live in Northern California, but Tony lives up in the mountains. And you know, yeah, I mean, just long story short, I don't get to see him as often as I would like, you know, and definitely just because also like we're old, the older you get, like friendships are different. You know, an adult friendship is like, yeah, dude, we should hang out. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then you never do, you know what I mean? Because everyone has families and kids and jobs and all that. It's like, we kind of know how it goes. But to have that day at my house this summer was great. It brought joy to my heart, dude. And you know, yeah. So my relationship with the guys is strong, and yeah, man, we're good like that.
So the final quote sent in here is a funny story, actually. So this is sent in from AC Slade from Dope, Murder Dolls, and the Misfits. AC says, this is maybe my favorite quote. He says, "I'll never forget the Murder Dolls touring with Papa Roach. First day of the tour, Jacoby is hanging out and says, 'Guys, I'm sober now, so no partying for me.' And I was like, okay, cool. I'll talk to him at some point. Maybe we can hit some meetings together." The next day, second day of the tour, our dressing room door opens. It's Jacoby with a bottle of vodka, face bright red, and screams, "Johnny Vodka's back, LOL." That's the story from AC Slade.
Yes, dude, that tour with the Murder Dolls. So if anyone who's unfamiliar with the Murder Dolls, it was like AC and Joey from Slipknot, Wednesday 13. The bass player was this dude Eric, and drummer was this guy Ben that everyone called Ghoul. But they're like this like campy, like horror rock. They're not really horror, but they're kind of like in that vein, like punk rock. Like if the Ramones, like, and the Misfits had a baby with the Cramps. And yeah, dude, it's that stuff, dude. And it was just fucking fun as all hell. And what a tour. We had fun on that tour. That was an amazing time. And sadly, we lost Joey. Right, we lost Joey, and Ben, the drummer from Murder Dolls, has also passed away. So, but dude, AC, another one of my boys, great friend to me, great guy. Just love that dude to death. Part of my crew. You know what I mean? Yeah, love you, AC.
So every interview, I ask my guests if they can provide a question to the podcast that I'm going to ask the next guest. So without knowing who the next guest is, if they're male or female or age or profession, they just provide a question and you can have fun with it. And then I'll ask the next guest. It's like a chain that goes through the entire podcast.
Sure.
And my last guest. So this question comes to you from Steve Malella, who's been the Finger 11 drummer for the last 10 years since our friend Rich Bedeau. And without knowing that you were next, his question is, have you done everything you originally set out to do? So maybe you at 16, 17, 18, your dreams in music, have you done everything you set out to do?
I would say yes and more and more. I mean, my bucket list as far as a musical career has been filled. You know what I mean? I think the only thing that would be missing from that list would be uh, the sustainability. You know what I mean? So every experience that you can have. Well, I never played Saturday Night Live, so that there's that. Would have liked to have done that, but other than that, I mean, like, dude, I've played every room you could think of, every side, from stadiums to dirty clubs. You know, we've done the award shows, we've gotten the nominations. I never expected to get nominated for a Grammy. Like, winning a Grammy was never even so that wasn't even on my list. So if that had happened, that would be like, I don't even know what to do with that. But everything on my list that I set out to do when I was a kid, you know, make great records, tour the world, make friends, have a good time. You know what I mean? Express myself, share my soul with in my music. I've done that. You know what I mean? So I've done everything I wanted to do and more. I don't think there's a lot that I could, you know, except for keep it going. That's the only thing I didn't do, which in a way is great in and of itself. Like, dude, I came in, I did what I did, I said what I had to say, and I dipped the fuck out.
And five
Can't,
albums is actually, that's a long time, you know,
yeah,
to be at the top. So
it's a great body of work. You know what I mean? And the band continues to do it. Like they've persevered and continued and succeeded in, and the band has grown into a whole different, like, now, like, they're like more of a established, like, elder statesman of rock or whatever, which I'm like, I never thought that in my wildest dreams, I never believed that, or never believed that it could be possible that my little garage band from, like, I thought, like, dude, like, I always believed that I would have a career, right? But where it's gone is way beyond anything that I could have imagined.
and there's about 5 songs off of their last album and 5 songs off of the new album that are my most played songs of the year for those years on Spotify. Like, man, they're putting out some bangers as good as ever now. It's impressive.
Oh my God, the new record, Ego Trip, like, so long, like, little known fact, like, I had that record a year before it came out because the guys shared it with me. So and I literally would listen to that album on repeat because I loved it so much. I'll tell you this about that record. It's the first record that they made without me that I wish I could have been part of. Like, I wish I had made those songs with them. It's that good. I love that record. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh damn. Like, and that for a band to release an album like that this far along in a career, like, unheard of. You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to be like 11, 12 albums in and then bust out Ego Trip? Like, I don't know, like, you've heard the record, so you know what I'm talking about. But anyone who hasn't heard it, I mean, like, yeah, dude, the naysayers and haters, like, and there's fans who, like, love a certain particular sound of Papa Roach. But for me, who knows what it's like on the inside, to hear that stuff come from them, I'm floored. It's amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
they've somehow pulled it off where they brought in electronic influences but it's still Papa Roach. It's still heavy. It's still catchy. It's still rock. But they're taking the best of another genre and just adding that as like another weapon in their arsenal. And the 4 or 5 singles are all undeniable great songs. I'm really impressed. But so this puts you on the spot a little bit, but can you provide a question now to the podcast for the next guest that comes on without knowing who it is? So just any question, and then I ask them, and maybe it ends up being another drummer, maybe it ends up being a best-selling author, who knows? But just without thinking too hard about it, any question that comes to mind, it could be serious, it could be funny, it could be heartfelt, anything come to mind that I can ask the next guest to keep the chain going.
Dude, did I even answer the question that you asked me? And
yes.
What was the
Have
question?
you done everything you originally set out to do?
Yes.
Yeah, you had a great
Okay,
answer.
Great. Okay, awesome. So if I have a question for the next guest, and I don't know who it could be anybody, right?
It could be anyone.
Creative? Are they all creative? Is your podcast creative focused?
Anyone that is amazing at what they do. It could be in any industry. It's usually more creative. It's usually an author or a speaker or a musician.
Okay.
Just anything. What's coming to you?
Without knowing, so obviously like the person it's gonna be a person of note, right? Successful in their field, whatever that may be. So I would have to say, okay, my question is this. If you could go back in time and visit your childhood self, right? Let's say your 12-year-old self. We talked about the 12-year-old self earlier. And you can give that person any advice about what's coming in the future and how to handle it. If you can give your 12-year-old self any advice about your life, what would it be?
Perfect.
Yeah.
There you go. And so I have just one more question. Can you handle one final question?
I can, sure.
All right. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
Oh man. I think the thing I'm most proud of and the thing I'm most grateful for is the fact that I survived.
It's a big one. It's a big one.
I almost died. Shit almost killed me, bro. Not the career, but you know what I mean? Like, I was born with a defect of a disease of mind, body, and spirit that manifests itself in addiction. You know what I mean? And sometimes the pairing of this disease and large amounts of success aren't necessarily the best recipe for a sustainable life. You know what I mean? And in my case, that proved to be the case. And like I said, I think if I could look back on something, it would be like I showed up, I said my piece, I did what I felt like I came here to do, and then I dipped out. And now I get to live a completely different life that is still sustained by the work I did back then. You know what I mean? Like all my work is what pays the bills today, but today I get to be a father and I get to be a reliable, responsible, trustworthy, father and partner and family member and friend, someone with integrity, which, as a kid, I had integrity. I was raised very well by my parents. They instilled those values in me. It's just things got a little squirrely there in the middle with rock and roll and the success and all that. But knowing now that, and like I said, like I was ready to say goodbye. I was ready to say goodbye in the biggest way you can, right? That's what the Paramore Sessions is about. But looking back on it now and seeing that like I made it, like there's a saying in my circle that's like we're living on overtime right now. It's like I'm on God's time now. So it's now the things I choose to do, like I said, my priorities have shifted. And if another opportunity came my way, either to make more music, let's say if there, if there's one thing I would like to do before I leave this planet, I would say I would like to make another record with my brothers in Papa Roach. Whether it's doesn't even have to be a Papa Roach record. I just want to make a record with them again. I think it would be great. Um, that would be the last thing on my bucket list, and that would just be. But even then, if it never happens, just having the relationship I have with them now and living the life I get to live today, it's all gravy, baby. It's all gravy.
Awesome. And as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a drummer. I want to acknowledge you for dreaming big from the start, having a vision of what's possible, putting in the work, following things through, and you achieving all the success that you achieved, whether it's the award nominations or the platinum certification or the #1 singles. You showed the rest of us guitarists and musicians what is truly possible if you dedicate yourself to the craft. We saw what the top looks like. Someone's done it, which means that we could do it if we apply ourselves. I want to thank you for all the music you created with Papa Roach. That's the soundtrack to my life, the soundtrack to millions of lives around the world. I mean, I grew up playing Last Resort. I grew up playing Scars. These were staples with the bands I played with. I want to acknowledge you for the strength to overcome the addictions and for the courage to speak about the road to recovery, which helps a lot of people to see that if they're currently in a dark place, they can look at someone that's been where they've been and has gotten to the other side to show that you too can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. And last but not least, I want to thank you as a fan since 15 years old. I want to thank you for sitting down with me here today for the last 2+ hours. For this interview, answering questions that I've wanted to know the answers to for a long time, multiple decades. So thank you so much, Dave, for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.
Joel, thank you for having me on, dude. It was such a pleasure, dude. And yeah, man, thanks for reaching out. And I would love to do this again sometime. You know what I mean? If there's anything that ever comes up that you feel like, hey, dude, I want to have Dave on again, like we should do it again. That'd be cool.
Hey man, yeah. I got page after page of questions that have not been answered yet. So we'll do a part 2. And when there's news of things dropping in the future, we'll get you back on. We'll do round 2.
For sure. Absolutely, man. Thanks again, dude. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you're very welcome. To our listeners, thanks for sticking with us for the last couple hours. To the Dave fans, the Papa Roach fans, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.